we've got a bit of time for questions. I'll take them in threes. I would just ask you to give your name and your affiliation, and to be as brief as you can, because I think there'll be quite a lot of people who would like to speak. Who would like to start? Yes, over there. Yeah.
My name is Tanya My.
Can you wait just a moment for the microphone? Thank you.
My name is Tanya Wagener. I'm a lawyer, and I'd like to just bring to this meeting's attention a similar experience in another part of Africa where there was intervention when the regional bodies got together and signed the Lomé Agreement, making peace between the government of Sudan and the rebels. That treaty was actually guaranteed by the UN at the time. But thereafter, for a number of reasons, it was considered not appropriate to make peace with rebels. And the UN and the powerful bodies in that P5 effectively put an end to the peace agreement in Sierra Leone, and a resort to force was used. So I'm sharing that experience with this meeting, because really at the end of the day, if development is the objective, which I think all right-minded people here today are concerned with development, I hope, development, peace and justice, and undermining a people, no matter what the faults of their leader, by issuing a warrant in this way, I think is absolutely scandalous.
Thank you. Who else? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hafiz Muhammad from Justice Africa. Actually, I have a point for the three speakers. Do they agree with me that the ICC the responsibility is not protecting peace and security in the world? I think this is the Security Council resolution, and the ICC is for justice. That means I think people are focusing on Okambo and Okambo's fault. I think his duty is justice. I think the Security Council is responsible, because Security Council deferred this case to him, and they know the implication of that. I think. My other question is specifically to Ambassador Omar, with regard to expelling the humanitarian organizations. The way the government of Sudan actually expelled the humanitarian organizations, there's a lot of suspicions, because you cannot just half an hour after the ICC decision, you come to the office with like 12 security officers and people from HAC and hand them a letter saying we revoke your license and you have to leave within 24 hours. I don't think, and some of them, they're being told that, they discovered that they have links with the ICC. I think if someone have links with the ICC, the government should have known that long time ago and take action. It's not just something happening within half an hour from the ICC decision. I don't think the ICC decision actually disclosed that, some NGOs actually passing information to us and then allows us to, And the question is, and also, I think the government have a responsibility. It's not the agencies. The agencies are helping. But the well-being of the people is the government responsibility. I think the worst thing for the government should have done is to put in place a mechanism by which they ensure that food, medical treatment, and all the clean water being actually available for people needed before actually expelling the organization. Because now there is a vacuum, and I've spoken to many organizations just before I came here, and they don't know. They hand over all their assets, and there is no one replacing them. And the Sudanese organizations, I know them well, they don't have the capacity to replace that. And we will have a vacuum at the time when we have meningitis and people are struggling. I think I totally agree with Sarah that I will appeal to the government of Sudan to revoke this decision now.
Thank you, Hafiz. And a third one here.
Thanks, Richard. I'm Richard Cockett from The Economist. I just want to ask a very quick question to the ambassador. Why have the aid agencies been expelled? As I've spoken to a lot of them in Khartoum, none of them have been given a reason. So what is the reason for their expulsion from you?
Ambassador, would you like to pick up on those 2 points? Why have they been expelled, and whether the government, you think the government has got the capacity to step in?
Well, let me. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Tanya, I agree with you fully with your comments. In the Sudan, IGAD, the regional organization, actually played a good role, an instrumental role in bringing about peace in the South. And this is always why we say that regional organizations are very near, in the vicinity of the problem. They understand the problem. Their intervention, their mediation is well accepted. So the problem in the South is solved in a very good way, and now the implementation is going on. The same thing could have happened in Darfur. We had the Darfur peace agreement. It was a very good agreement, observed by many, signed by many states, and deposited in the UN and the African Union. But unfortunately, two of the rebel movements, they washed their hands away and they said they will not sign it. And there was a statement by the Security Council that whoever is working against the peace in Darfur will be pushed or sanctioned or whatever. But that did not happen, actually. And ultimately, those rebels, found a very good support from even members of the Security Council. Therefore, you see the problem here. The countries who helped in bringing about peace in the South now are not helping at all in bringing peace in Darfur. And the pressures exerted on the government are not like the pressures exerted on the rebel movement. The government has actually participated in all peace talks, all peace rounds regarding Darfur. Unfortunately, the rebel sides are not responding. They are not reciprocating, and they are not. Even if they come for negotiations, they don't come in good faith. Therefore, I agree with you, because there is an agreement between regional organization and the United Nations, and even I said it earlier that the Charter of the United Nations, give precedence to regional organizations to get involved in regional problems and try to solve them before they escalate and reach the Security Council. Hafiz, I thank you for your question. You said ICC is not concerned with politics. It is true. It is supposed to be a judicial system. But if we look at some instances, for example, let us look at the way the entire process is mentioned, is done. So far, the involvement of the ICC in issues in Africa took a number of ways, either by referral from state parties, for example, Uganda, Congo, DRC, that is the Congo DRC, and Central African Republic. The referral there by states to get rid of rebel movements. So, countries who believe that their judicial system may not be able to pass judgments or pass sentences or capture, bring those rebels to justice. Therefore, they resorted to the ICC. Later on, particularly Uganda, when Uganda saw that this may complicate things, may cut the road before reaching peace, then Uganda backed. Therefore, the issue of justice and peace, which one takes precedence, is always a question. And in Africa and elsewhere, it is always better to have peace and then justice. And this is the international experience here. I'm not saying that we continue with the problems and with the crimes until we reach justice. But justice should go sometimes hand in hand. But when you reach high posts like heads of state, things do differ.
Ambassador, could you move on to the third question? Why were they the aid agencies?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't have information about that. Had I any information, I would be very glad to provide it to you. But the information I get, and that's from the media, it's not official information, that there is a sort of cooperation between Ocampo and Ocampo himself, he said it. Ocampo himself, he said it.
There's cooperation between the NGOs and the ICC?
Yes, in a sort of fabrication of allegations or whatever. So perhaps I think there are intelligence reports. I don't know the contents of those reports that link some of the NGOs with Ocampo personally. But that is not official. This is what I get from the media.
Thank you very much. Julie, would you like to pick up on any of those
Just
questions?
one thing Hassan said about the responsibility of the Security Council. Of course, that's true, but the prosecutor does have wriggle room. The Rome Statute requires that investigations and prosecutions be in the interest of the victim. And going after Bashir patently now is not in the interest of the victim. You've got 1.5 million people who risk being without food, without help, without water. This is not in the interest of the victim. He could have done it at a different time, as I said before. It didn't have to be now. But basically, he had the choice whether to not do anything that was not in the interest of the victim. Either he got it badly wrong, in which case I think he has to say so, or he ignored the requirement that anything he did be in the interest of the victim.
Thank you. Sarah, anything to add?
No, I think
okay, thanks. All right, let's take 3 more questions. Yes, in the front row here.
My name is Margie Buchanan-Smith. I'm an independent policy researcher. And the first thing I want to say is also to share my concern about the timing of this ICC request for the arrest warrant. I think it's extremely unfortunate timing, and I think it's setting back the prospects of peace in Darfur by a long way. But the thing that really concerns me right now, very much along the lines of what both Zara and Julie were saying, is the humanitarian consequences of the decision to expel the agencies. And I really would request the ambassador to address that one, because I personally, having spent a lot of time out in Darfur in the last few years and having seen the work of those agencies, I simply cannot see how the required humanitarian response can be put in place to avert a humanitarian crisis of, I think, horrendous proportions. I think probably on a scale that we haven't even seen yet, with the way that the aid operation is being stopped in its tracks. There are literally thousands and thousands of people who are entirely dependent on that, and it is to the credit of the international humanitarian agencies that a famine of massive proportions has been avoided since 2003, and it's entirely due, I believe, to the work of those agencies.
Thank you. And there's a question, yeah, over there.
My name is Peter Tesh. I'm an academic and historian. For the purpose of this question, I have also a fishing interest in Mauritania. What we haven't discussed yet is the regional implications of the decision that is taken by the ICC. I mean, there should be no doubt that an unstable Sudan will have enormous repercussions down the south in the Great Lakes and the Rift and to the Horn, and if I may add, to the west beyond Chad. I mean, there are low intensity insurgencies happening in Niger, in Mali, and there's a Salafist threat which also Mauritania affects. But what is happening on, what the ICC is doing is replicated by the EU. Louis Michel doesn't communicate anymore. If a state, African state, doesn't do what if the African state doesn't do what Louis Michel wants it to do, it doesn't communicate. That is what happened to Mauritania, where they had the regime change. They are in the process back to democratize the country, but the EU is directing the process, is supporting opposition in that sense, and in that way, the Darfur rebel movement will be stronger and will be more emboldened and will be less inclined to come to the negotiating table.
Thank you. And behind you, yeah. Yes, you.
I'm on. I kind of feel compelled to say something positive about the International Criminal Court since everybody else is being so horrible about it. First thing I want to say is that everybody's been very critical about Moreno Ocampo. Ocampo is an impassionate Latin American. He doesn't get on very well with the judges in the court, who give him a pretty hard time. You only have to see him in the courtroom to see him, the relationship between him and the judges is not perhaps what it ought to be. It's a tense relationship. If anybody's to blame, if blame is the right way of thinking about it, it isn't Moreno Ocampo, whose role is to be a prosecutor. It's the judges in the pre-trial chamber who looked at the evidence that he presented and felt that there was a strong case to answer and agreed to issuing a warrant. We haven't seen that evidence, but those judges saw it and they considered it to be impressive enough to issue a warrant. Not up to Ocampo to issue a warrant, he seeks a warrant. Second point, this meeting is referring to the ICC indictment. It's worth bearing in mind, isn't it, that the ICC does not issue indictments. The ICC issues warrants. This became an issue, of course, in the Ugandan case. Once a warrant is out there, it disempowers the prosecutor. There's no room for negotiation. What the prosecutor did in this case was actually something quite interesting. He said back in June he was going to seek a warrant. So there's been all this discussion behind the scenes between him, if you like, informally suggesting that there was a kind of indictment and the process of actually leading to the judges in the pre-trial chamber agreeing that there was enough evidence to issue a warrant. The next point I think to make is that this is what ending impunity for the worst of crimes looks like. To say that the International Criminal Court, which was set up to end impunity for the worst of crimes and to hold those who were most accountable for them to account, this is what it looks like. This is the end product of that. If the ICC cannot issue a warrant for a head of state, then its function becomes virtually meaningless. It is clear in the Rome Statute that it can, and it has done it. And I think for many of us who feel that pushing on the possibilities of international criminal justice is a positive development, whatever the case in the Sudanese case, specifically, to have reached that point is a milestone. The point about Africa, I just want to make some observations about that. Look, let's be realistic. If we're talking about the worst of crimes, these have been perpetrated on a scale that is mind-numbing in Central Africa, compared with anywhere else in the world. In Sudan, in northern Uganda, in eastern Congo, crimes have been perpetrated here on a mind-numbing scale that dwarf anything anywhere else in the world. If the International Criminal Court's not going to operate here and take these situations seriously, there is simply no point in having an International Criminal Court. And finally, the point about President Bashir and the warrant. I think many of us find it rather seductive to dream about President Bashir in an ICC dock holding hands with Joseph Kony and being brought down to the same level. Many of us feel that's a rather positive thing. And we need to bear in mind that this is a permanent court. It's not going to go away. This warrant will not go away now. All right, it might not be exercised for some time, but it might be exercised in 10 or 15 years' time. It's a permanent court. It's a permanent warrant. That's the power of it.
Thank you, Tim. So we have the timing of this thing, which is going to create a humanitarian catastrophe, coming back to that. We have the regional implications. I think that hasn't come up yet. I mean, that it stretches down into Uganda, across into Congo, the Horn. It'll have implications in Ethiopia and Eritrea, you can be sure of that. And then across the other way through Central African Republic and Chad, right across to Mauritania. So I think that gives a sort of scale of the repercussions of this. And finally, yes, a voice for the ICC. saying this is a warrant, and maybe justified because of what has happened in the region. Would any of the speakers like to pick up on that, or shall we move on? Because these sound more like comments than questions, and I'll give you the chance to come back if you like.
Well, just,
Ambassador.
The three are more or less comments, and I agree with you, Mr. Smith, that the timing is really bad. Tesh, I think you are right, because sending a wrong signal to the rebel movements will make them more intransigent in their positions and in their refusal to sit for negotiations. And that is what we always kept saying, that any ill-advised involvement by the ICC will complicate and will prolong the peaceful settlement in Darfur. Yes, Ocampo is a prosecutor, but I don't think a prosecutor has to do this kind of job. The evidence he collected is one-sided. Ocampo is now actually calling the international community to break the international law. He's talking now about air piracy and encouraging states, to hijack planes together. So this is, I think, is not the right move.
What are you referring to there? Sorry.
Yes. Yesterday and the day before yesterday, Ocampo said the plane of President Bashir will be hijacked and he will be put to trial. And earlier on, he said that. No, that is it. He will be intercepted. What is interception then? It is an illegal move against the international law, and he should be the first, to understand that. Later, earlier on, he said the same thing. I think like 6 or 7 months ago, that when there was rumors that Harun is going to the pilgrimage, then he said he got sort of assistance from some states to intercept the plane and lead it forcibly to land in. So the entire thing, we think, is illegal. And that is not the job of a prosecutor. Prosecutor's job is to collect evidence, hand it over to the judges, and that's it. Not to enter and not to lead and not to put words in the judges' mouths. Thank you.
Julie, yeah.
A few quick things. On the worst crimes, there is the other view. Of course, I was in Lebanon in 2006. 1,200 people killed by the state of Israel in 10 days. With impunity, ditto in Gaza. I can't see when the government last killed 1,000 people in a week. It has done, but way back in 2003, 2004. A couple of points on the ICC.
Could you just put the microphone a little closer to you, because I think people at the back.
It's not on. Whoa.
Is it on?
I don't think so. I'll shout.
No. All right.
A couple of points on the ICC. Yes, the evidence, the judges did answer this, say there was a case to answer. None of us are disputing that. I'm not a lawyer. It's not for me to judge, but I'm sure the crimes against humanity were committed in 2003, 2004. However, the timing was in the hands of Moreno Ocampo, and I don't think the timing was correct. That's my main concern there. Secondly, you talk about the tensions between the judges and Moreno Ocampo. I would submit that the tension between the Darfur team and Moreno Ocampo is far more significant. I don't think I need to enumerate to you the people who have resigned from the Darfur team out of unhappiness with Luis Moreno Ocampo. I'm not saying the government hasn't committed crimes, it has, but there is a problem within the ICC. The chief trial attorney, 2 investigators, the deputy team leader, and the chief analyst have all resigned from the Darfur team. There is a problem with Moreno Ocampo, and it doesn't help us, I think, to deny that. It doesn't help the cause of the ICC to deny that. In saying that, I'm not justifying the crimes of the government. So please don't put me in the court of those people who oppose the ICC, because that's not correct. And of course, a seminal thing I think about the judges was they did throw out the charges of genocide against Ocampo. And he had made this the center point of his campaign against the ICC. And for me, it was a campaign. The language he used was really the language of the Save Darfur coalition. It alienated me at times, who 2004 saw what the government was doing in Darfur. I saw people dying. And I can't think of any case of international justice where a charge against such a senior person has been disallowed by a court. This is surely a personal rebuff to Miriam Ocampo and threatens to be a blow against the credibility of the court. So we can defend the ICC all we like, but I think we have to admit and acknowledge and be very precise about the problems of the court and not to let the government get away with the problems that they claim, which are not the real problems.
Thank you.
Welcome.
How are we doing for time?
We've got another 20 minutes.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay. Yes, over here. There's,
William Wallace from the Financial Times. I'd like to know what, particularly the ambassador, thinks the consequences will be to the CPA. Speaking privately, some SPLM people are expressing the fear that the ICC warrant basically gives the government a pretext to stall the CPA.
okay. Yes, gentleman here.
Hello, my name is Stephen Kalema. I would like to agree with the previous speaker that the timing is wrong. I think, bringing this case against Bashir is not going to be helpful in terms of helping the humanitarian catastrophe, all in the process of the peace process that was going on to try and bring some peace in Sudan. I agree that if Bashir has committed any crime, he should be brought to court. But as I said earlier on, the timing is wrong. But also the process is wrong, because the African unity was providing an opportunity to deal with this matter. I think that would have been more helpful. By the ICC taking over this case, that is not going to help the situation at all. I've heard that the NGOs have been involved in gathering information and passing it to the ICC. I have no evidence about that, but if that has happened, that is wrong, because the NGOs should restrict themselves to the work of humanitarian aid to those communities. Finally, I would like to say that I think it was Tim who said that where else in the world have such crimes been committed, and I think we have already had examples. But I would like to add to those and say that these same magnitude of crimes are being committed even today in the Middle East, in Iraq. As long as those who are committing them have got the backing of the strong powers, all the strong powers themselves are being involved, then they will get away with it. If Bashir is to go to the ICC, I think there are a lot of other presidents serving and previous who should also be taken to ICC for the crimes they have committed in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East by supporting oppressive governments to the Palestinians.
Thank you. And yes, here in the back row.
I'm Judith Melby from Christian Aid. I have a question for the ambassador. I think he's been asked before, but I haven't quite heard the answer. Now that the NGOs have been expelled, how is the government actually going to look after these millions of people in the camps? How are you filling this vacuum?
Ambassador, would you like to pick up on that?
Sure. Thank you, Julia. Well, the CPA is a very fundamental development in the history of the Sudan. That's the agreement that put to an end a long war in Africa. So the interest of implementation of the CPA actually exceeds the two parties that signed it. Now it is a popular ownership of that agreement. The implementation, and let me tell you that the CPA now is part of the constitution of the country. Therefore, the implementation is a constitutional obligation on the government. The presidency met the day the ICC issued its decision, and they reiterated to the Sudanese people that the implementation of the CPA will continue. The government of national unity will do its utmost, of course, to implement that agreement. The agreement has schedules, of course. One of them is the elections, which is supposed to take place later the middle of this year, and the elections will be will take place accordingly. Stephen, I agree with you that it's not only Africa that has problems. Elsewhere in the world there are problems, and there are lots of things done by big powers in the world that has that must be questioned. Julia, you said about filling the vacuums. I just want to say that in the Sudan nowadays there are almost about 150 international NGOs. They are operating in Darfur and in other parts of the country. Besides this, we have national non-governmental organizations also working in Darfur and elsewhere in the country. So, and those NGOs, I think, are very active in provision of different services, be it education, health, sanitation, whatever. So, I'm not sure if there will be a vacuum or not. I'm not sure. But with the existence of 150 organizations and some about maybe 300 NGOs national, I'm not sure about the capacity of the national NGOs. I'm not sure. So I don't want to give you information or to give you statements that I'm not sure of. But the number of NGOs in the ground is big.
But surely if they had the capacity, there wouldn't be the need for the international funds in the first place. Are you saying you think they have got that capacity now?
Some of them do, and others, I'm not sure about that. But usually there is sort of cooperation between national and international organizations in the country. So in terms of training, in terms of allocating certain jobs to be done by local NGOs. So the cooperation between national and international non-governmental organizations is going on.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah.
I think I'd like to pick. I don't know. Yes. Okay. I'd like to pick up on this because I know the situation on the ground quite in detail in terms of the capacity of the organizations. I think Julia's quoted some numbers in Darfur. The agencies that have been expelled were, basically delivering between 60 and 70% of the aid assistance. Some claim up to 80%. What has been taken away is the greatest capacity to operate. Yes, the numbers are there. 150 organizations are in the whole of Sudan, but I think in Darfur there are about 120. But some of the largest organizations were responsible for delivery the vast majority of the aid, and these are the agencies that have been asked to leave. Likewise, I've mentioned the ones that will not be longer able to operate in the three areas, particularly in southern Kordofan and in Blue Nile, where I know very well there are only, about 3 or 4 national organizations with very, very limited capacity, and they will not be able to fill the gap. I can say that with absolute certainty, that in the three areas there is absolutely no national capacity to fill the gap. There'll be some moderate capacity, for instance, the Sudanese Red Crescent, Eastern Sudan maybe, but there is no way that the gap can be filled with, at this point in time. The rainy season is approaching. It will start in May. This is the time where food is prepositioned in Darfur, in the three areas, in the south. You cannot replace the logistical capacity overnight. And when the largest providers of aid go, and if the food is not prepositioned, May comes, and there is no way to fill the hunger gap, which as we know, particularly in the southern, in the south and in the transition areas, but also in southern Darfur, characterizes the summertime, our summertime, between July and the harvest time in October. We also know that perhaps there is a marginal capacity of people to survive anyway, resorting to collection of wild food and other distress coping mechanisms. But in the camps in Darfur, this is not an option. People are entirely dependent on international support. They have no access to alternative livelihood sources or medical care or water provision, and that creates a really impending, the conditions for an impending crisis.
Thank you. More questions? Where's the microphone? Sorry, I'm sending you back and forth. Let's start here and work across the room.
Hi, my name's Lizzie Scaife. I'm actually not with any association, but I just have a question which was touched on by Sarah and Julie, which is the association now with a government whose president has now had a warrant issued against him, and what the consequences for the future dealings with that government, both by public entities, so governments of other countries, but also by private entities, and just what your thoughts are on, especially in view of sort of development for Sudan.
Okay. Yes, here in the front. We'll pass it through.
A question for Julie, please. I'm Ruben Sraim. I'm a student at LSE, PhD student. And I wonder if you think this removal of aid agencies from Darfur is also collective punishment to the people by the government. Peace out.
Okay.
I'm Frank Brumfitt, also a student at LSE. I'd just like to ask, there seems to be a general consensus that the timing of this warrant is very bad. I mean, the situation's been going on for a very long time. When would the timing be good, is what I'd like to know. And the other thing, very quickly, is there's another kind of consensus that it seems that the ICC warrant is bad for the peace process in Darfur. And I'd like to ask the ambassador, is it mainly bad for the peace process because of the actions it would provoke from the Sudanese government? Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Ambassador, would you like to pick up on those? Would there have been a good moment for the warrant to be
the
arrested?
last question, I think, is addressed to me.
I think it is.
And I will answer that. About timing, whether it is bad for the actions or reprisal actions by the Sudanese government. This is how I understand. No. No, actually, because I said it earlier, and I will say it again, that the government is very keen to reach a settlement in Darfur. And we have participated in almost all rounds of talk from the start of the crisis in Darfur. And we say the involvement is bad, be it in this time or before, because any involvement, regional, international, or from the ICC in an ongoing conflict, it will give certain wrong signals to one party. And in this case, the party that got the wrong signal are the rebel movements. You may appreciate the fact that in Darfur now there are about 38 rebel movements fighting each other, fighting with tribal militias, fighting sometimes across the border, fighting with the. There is no one war in Darfur now. The war is between the rebel movements and the casualties. The majority of the casualties now are taking place between the rebel movements, sometimes of the same tribe. Let us have Sudan Liberation Army, that is Minni's group, and the Justice and Equality Movement. They are from the same tribe, killing each other. So the situation is very complicated, and we said the timing is wrong because had it not been of the involvement of the ICC, we could have solved the problem earlier on. So this is why I said it is wrong timing, and it will always continue to be a wrong timing for the solution of this problem.
What about the suggestion that it's not the warrant itself, it's the reaction of the government that is going to cause the catastrophe? There is this suspicion that the government might say, you know, if you do that to us, we'll show you what we can do, and create a disaster.
So that will not take place. But you know, immediately after the issue of the decision, the Justice and Equality Movement, they said they are not going to participate in the Doha process. They are the one who signed the goodwill agreement. It's not a peace agreement as such, but showing a goodwill for entering into negotiations for solving the problem in later on. immediately they said they are not going to participate in the peace process. And they vowed that they are going to topple the government. So this is the wrong signal, and this is the wrong position by the rebel movements, because we always kept saying that solution of the Darfur problem is not through the barrel of the gun. It has to come through negotiations for solving the problem. And the peace process also is complicated by the fact that the other party is very much divided. How do you reach a peace agreement with 38 rebel movements? None of them is ready to recognize the other. None of them is ready to recognize the other. So if we continue waiting for them to unite or to have a united negotiating team, then we will be waiting forever. Therefore, whoever is ready for peace negotiations, we are ready to sit and negotiate with him. This is what took place in Doha, and now they said they are not going to sit, saying that the president has lost his legitimacy, and the legitimacy of the president comes from the support of his people. So the legitimacy of any president cannot be decided by a foreign power.
More questions? Yes, over on the far side again. Sorry.
This is Caesar from Conservation Resources. My question is, if we envisage a situation where, is there a capacity within the National Party to actually continue governing Sudan while President Bashir defends himself in court? And the second question is, if there is another issue of genocide or crime against humanity that evidence is collected by the community, would it be possible for the ICC to take that case up, taking into consideration the energy that one particular case actually takes in any one time, at any one time? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, just on your left.
Hi, Zurab Kabiridze. My question is to Ambassador regarding the remaining NGOs active in country. Does your government have plans to expand the list of 13 and include other NGOs to revoke their registration?
Okay, and yes, on your right. Thank you.
My name is Seema. I'm with Global Witness. I'm glad that the gentleman asked about what is good timing. The case that comes to my mind is Charles Taylor, who I don't know if it was an indictment or an arrest warrant that was issued by the Special Court for Sierra Leone, and at that time he was president of Liberia. The Liberian government recognized it, and he went into exile in Nigeria. I'm wondering if the panelists could discuss a little bit of how that case differs from this case.
More questions for you, Ambassador.
Okay. Caesar, you said whether the national or the government can do without a president while he's answering the questions or whatever at the ICC. I think I don't want us to miss the picture. The president now, before the eyes of his own people, is an innocent man. He is the man for peace. He is the one who brought about peace in the south, signing the CPA. He is the one who brought peace in the east, that is the East Sudan peace agreement, and even the Darfur peace agreement. He is the one who led them for quite some time, and now they can see development, a vibrant economy in the country. Therefore, it is unforeseen that the Sudanese people will get rid of their president. For us all, he is not, as is said by the ICC. And Your second question, it's about the ICC, but I forgot. Can you remind me?
So much of ICC time. If there's a situation where communities can gather more evidence against any particular president, is it within the capacity of ICC to investigate that particular case?
Okay. Always the ICC is complementary to national laws, and even this is well established in the ICC statute, Rome Statute, that the involvement of the ICC comes only if the national judiciary, the national judicial system is either non-existent, unable, or not willing to pass judges or to apply to administer justice. And this is not the case of Sudan. Perhaps it can happen in some countries, but Sudan is not a failed state. The judiciary history goes back to more than 2 centuries. Our lawyers, they are, most of them, they are trained here in UK, and they help establishing judicial system in a number of Arab and African countries. Therefore, we don't think the ICC has any jurisdiction on the Sudan. Another question about the NGOs and whether the government will send out or cancel the registration of more than the 13. I'm not sure. There is no way I can answer. I don't know. Seema, you asked about Taylor, and Taylor wasn't in power when he was indicted. He wasn't in power.
I think that's right. Okay. Sarah, do you want to...
I think Julie wants
to... Julie, sorry. Do you want
to...
to...
Just to take issue with your Ambassador on a few things. When he asked if... I can't remember the exact question, but if the government was going to punish people, he said that will not take place. Well, it has taken place through the expulsion of the 13 agencies. We just can't get away from that. Whatever we think of the timing, I mean, the government has punished the people by expelling these 13 agencies. Secondly, you said at some stage that there is a judicial process going on in Darfur. People are being punished. I'm sorry, I can't accept that. Massive crimes were committed in 2003, 2004 with some very obvious suspects. And what has been done by the Sudanese courts, frankly, is close to a joke. This gentleman here asked me about collective punishment. Do I think the government is collectively punishing the people of Darfur? I'd like to know what Sarah thinks on that. I honestly don't know. Is it their intent to collectively punish the people in the camps? I would say probably not. I don't think they care that they are. But is it their intent to collectively punish? I don't think so. I don't subscribe to this genocidal theory at all. What I think it was for me was the security clique that runs the country, I believe, is genuinely convinced that there is this conspiracy by all these actors to do this, that, and the other, and this is why they did this. They don't care about human death. We've seen that in the south, we've seen it in the Nuba and the oil fields. They don't care. But I don't believe, I'm not talking about all of them, this small clique, but I don't believe that their intent was collective punishment. I do believe that the intent of Israel in Gaza was collective punishment. If you listen to the statements of the state of Israel as regards the Palestinians, they are absolutely frightful. We haven't killed enough, kill more, kill more, kill more. And the explicit rewriting or attempt to rewrite international humanitarian law by the state of Israel, redefining a non-combatant as somebody who is passive, is really a dangerous development. There's nothing like that in Sudan. And as I've said, I cannot remember when the government of Sudan last killed 1,000 people in a week. It was probably 2003, 2004. It was bad enough then, but it hasn't happened in the last 5 years. But I'd like to know what Sarah thinks about collective punishment.
No, I agree with you. I think the issue for me has been many in the government of Sudan. You refer to this clique, and I think the clique that also, the elite, I would call it, or perhaps the hardliners, some of which also guide humanitarian aid commission, have always dealt with some of the international organizations with an enormous degree of suspicion. And I think also, we probably need to also examine our action as humanitarian actors. We have not always, operated in Sudan with a great deal of transparency for, perhaps good or bad reasons, but there is mistrust on both sides. And that, leads the government to heighten the restrictions very often in I believe, in an unjustified manner. But there hasn't been, a very good, cooperation for many years. In the south before, in the Numba Mountains, then later in Darfur. It is obviously not helped when, the prosecutor himself says that he gets evidence on crimes by humanitarian organizations. I think, these are very dangerous statements that put the action and the mere existence of humanitarian organizations in Sudan a great danger. I don't know whether it's true or not, if it is grandstanding. Somebody has defined Ocampo earlier as flamboyant character. It surely is, but you should think a lot more carefully about what he says, because he's obviously put the life and the operations of many, many people in Sudan at risk also through his own wars.
I think that's all we have time for. I'd like to thank Sara Pantuliano and Julie Flint and Ambassador Omar Siddig for this debate. I've learned a lot. I hope you have too. Thank you very much indeed. I don't know about the next ODI meeting. The next Royal African Society meeting is on Monday evening at 6, where Michaela Wrong will be discussing her book, It's Our Time to Eat, the book about corruption in Kenya. You're all welcome to come to that. And thank you very much indeed for coming.
And
Sorry, Sarah, did you...
No, rather than a meeting, I wanted to just highlight our report on the livelihoods of the Misriya and, the instability in the western sector of Southern Kordofan will come out next week.
Okay.